Hey, everybody. Good day. Early stream today. It's because we have two really special books that we wanted to discuss. And we're going to have some very special guests coming on a little bit later to ask questions and give us a chance to pick their brains a little bit on their thought process. The two books are similar in themes, stories of street justice. It's The People by Phil Diaz and Thin Blue Line, a very controversial, very well known book by Mike Barron. It shouldn't be controversial, but in this day and age, something like that turned out to be. The publishers rejected the book. They did not want to do police content, and Mike was wanting to produce a book that was a response to the insanity of defund the police movement that was ongoing at the time. So it's the times that we live in, folks, and these are the comics that we have. Both were crowdfunded, so they got to see the light of day, and we're incredibly thankful for that. So that's on the docket tonight. Look forward to that. Jumping into the chat, let's see who we have joining us. We have Jay Dollar, who says hi. You're very anticlimactic, Jay Dollar. I don't know what to do with you. We have Linkovich. Oh, look, well-read pretending he does a serious review show every now and then. Yay. It's all a facade. Just go back to sleep, wake up in a few hours, and we'll be doing an unzipped, and everybody can get wasted and have a good time. But in the meantime, we're just going to have to get high on our own supply. We have some nice product on deck here. We've got three panelists. Everybody, please welcome the good stuff, Twitless.
I was going to say we're going to get high on our own farts, but...
maybe yours, your wine farts.
Yeah, there we go.
We also have the highest of the high. Please welcome Admiral Wackass.
I am high.
That's a good place to be. And then as we have the highs, we also have the lows on the other side of the planet. Please welcome Kimosabi.
G'day everyone, I'm called Kimosabi, the man with the plan for the land down under. Always happy to be back on the show, boys. Thanks for the invite and looking forward to talking about these, similar but slightly controversial books. There's a lot of crossover here, a lot of overlap, but at the same time, I think the characters would be at odds with one another.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. I was going to bring that up because it seems like they're both very protagonist focused books.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that would be an interesting point of discussion. My favorite motivations are probably going to come into play here a lot as we talk about these two. So, let's actually just jump in because we do have a schedule to keep. We have guests coming up. I will bring up first Thin Blue Line, the campaign raised. Sorry. 95, yeah.
Holy Julie, good on him.
Yeah. 95K. It's, nothing to sneeze at, appeared on Fox and Friends.
Yeah.
And
is Mike Barron coming on after this?
he is, yes.
Oh,
45
I'm going to fanboy a bit. I've been reading his stuff.
The bloody Red Baron himself.
Oh man, I've been reading his stuff for 30 years. This is meeting a celebrity to me. I'm gonna try and contain myself and keep my panties on.
Oh, I mean, have at it. So that's what this show's for. Creators meeting critics and people who admire their work.
And getting their knickers with it.
And getting their knickers, wet. So here's the work by Mike. It's a cop story in a very tumultuous time. Focuses on a main female protagonist, I believe. The officer is Valeria Baca and her partner Bob Mack. As their detail guarding the mayor turns into a fight for survival, mobs burn down City Hall, forcing the officers to improvise on the run, relying only on their training and wits as the mayor's protestations and eagerness to placate the rioters prove fruitless. Right. So interesting setup there. It would be great to dive into it a little bit further and explore what exactly unfurls in this story. The second book we have, and we don't have to talk about them both at the same time, but I just wanted to quickly show their campaigns, is an Ashcan from Phil. It was available on the Lost Pages 2 campaign. And here we are, scrolling down. This campaign in general was not so shabby as well, raising $38,000. And here we have a Lost Pages 1 and 2, and The People Ashcan. It was in the reprint pack, as well as here, available just with the main book. So also proved to be a very interesting work with a very interesting main character. So we were happy for the opportunity to be able to discuss both of these books and compare them appropriately. So yeah, with that, guys, let's start with Thin Blue Line. Would somebody like to give me a little synopsis and set the stage for what they thought of this work by Mike?
I typed one up. So
Here's what the book is.
well, you go ahead,
I gotta be prepared.
I got one.
I want to prepare earlier.
In a world that's totally not the George Floyd
world.
BLM riots during 2020, racially charged riots overtake Hagen, Illinois, and the only thing standing in the way of lawless chaos is the police. On the front lines are Officer Valeria Baca and her partner Bob Mack. But when the protests get out of control, the two-faced mayor of Hagen finds that his pandering rhetoric will not protect him. As the security detail makes its way through the riots, it becomes clear that not everyone is going to make it out alive. When America is turned into a war zone, the only thing that can restore order is the thin blue line.
Yeah, that's pretty good, actually. I can't
I
knock
don't
that
know.
too hard. That was all right.
Give it one thumb.
I like
one
he
thumb
finished
up.
on the thin blue line. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd rewrite that thing like 3 times to get the thin blue line at the end.
Yeah,
we'll
yeah, nice.
Again, it was a controversial book. Deemed too controversial by most publishers, it will not be available in comic shops. So everything that this book earned was through the crowdfund campaign, the independent model. And it said that making street cops heroes did not align with their business model was the response that they got going out to publishers asking to print this book.
And it really speaks to, I think, the biggest strength of this book is the fact that it presents the side of the argument that we don't often see. These guys saying street cops as heroes is not a part of our business model. They're picking a lane. They're picking a side. Mike Barron's showing us the other side of things. But unlike that X-Men issue where that girl stabs the dude in the neck because a plastic bag from his shop, not even his shop, he was working behind the counter. You guys know that one? There's a dude working behind the shop in the counter. One of the X-Men walks in, stabs him in the neck. He's like, why? He's like, a plastic bag from your fast food chain ended up in the ocean, ended up choking out a turtle over in Hawaii somewhere. So I traveled all the way over here to kill you for it. It's like that is cartoonishly evil, cartoonishly dumb. There's no cartoonishness. I don't believe there's any cartoonishness in Thin Blue Line. It presents a very level-headed representation of the other side of the argument. And if people want to argue and say, no, it doesn't, I thought it was cartoonish, I can point to articles and interviews and examples of pretty much everything that's in there. He's taken those phrases and those sound bites. They were actually said by people. Stuff like, we're going to stand back and give you a space to destroy. Like that has been said by politicians. So when Mike Barron's presenting the other side of this argument, he is presenting, and that's what they don't like. It's like libs of TikTok. They don't like you can't show our videos to everybody because it makes us look bad. It's like, that's your problem. If you make stuff that makes you look bad, stop making stuff that makes you look bad. You know, these guys are like, oh, we don't want you to present exactly how it went down. Don't want you to present the sort of things that we did and the sort of things that were said. You can't tell the truth. That's what they're saying to Mike Barron. They're saying, oh no, telling the truth does not align with our business model, because he's just presenting the truth on one side of things. And then just to back this up, finally, right near the end there's a bunch of hillbillies that turn up in a truck. I use the term hillbilly with great affection, like I do use the term bogans in Australia, and they want to help out. And Barker, the lady cop, says, you're not a cop, you're not trained, you're not National Guard, you're not supposed to be here. If you come in here, I will arrest you. So she plays the cop right down the middle of the line. She doesn't say, yeah, that's great, let's go shoot some of those N-words and drink White Claw. She says, no, you're not supposed to be here, you're just going to make things worse. And the cops, the hillbillies are saying, we're on your side. And she's saying, no, you're not. I'm a cop. A cop is my side. I'm going to do my job. We're going to get it back under control. But you being here makes things worse. You being here is going to get people killed.
The book is heavily on the side of law and order.
Absolutely.
It represents that perspective. And I completely agree. I was going to actually mention that, so I'm glad you did, Kimasabi, that we can get into it, because I actually disagree a little bit with what you were saying that regarding the cartoonishness to an extent. I actually do agree/disagree, but I will say this: regardless of how this book plays out, and there are strengths and weaknesses in its execution, I think this book is important. And exactly for the reason that you said, because of the fact that we're very accustomed to getting one side of the argument. And so it's necessary if we're ever going to move forward as a society, as a country, as whatever, to be able to get both sides of a conversation. And this is the pro law and order side of the conversation. Mike Barron represents it very well here.
Yeah.
And so for that reason alone, regardless of anything else, it's an important book to talk about. It's an important book for people to read.
Admiral, I wanted to ask you, what is your impression hearing what Kimosabe and Twitless have said, that this is a response in defense of law and order? How heavy-handed is the messaging here, and how much of it is still a comic book at its heart?
I think just the way he built it with that it was going to mostly be focused on the entertainment. I think the politics hit me a little heavier than I thought it would in the book, though they're completely right about that. All of this is just stuff that literally was in the headlines and kind of just got swept under the rug and didn't get as much coverage as other things. But I just expected it to be a little less focused on that, where like there were pages where the politician's kind of just going on a monologue about, how shitty he is. Which, fuck politicians, but
it definitely reinforced that idea. It's like he gave him every opportunity to give every soundbite. Like he's literally getting attacked by protesters throwing bricks at him, and they're dragging him away to keep him safe. And he's screaming out "Black Lives Matter," "Trans rights matter," "Trans lives are no alien is illegal." And
Every slogan,
every slogan you can think of.
I think the most.
Go on, mate.
I think the most effective thing that Mike Barron did in this was like humanizing the main character and making her incredibly relatable. She's not, we don't really get her like political view of these things. It's just her experiencing this happening, and then
she's really just doing a job.
Her just being a person doing a job, trying to raise her family. I think that was the best thing they did in the book, was just kind of like humanizing the police.
I think it's a strength and a weakness, because one of my criticisms is the fact that when it comes, and I'm glad we didn't get Valeria doing a whole bunch of political diatribes, so I'm not saying I needed a bunch of that, but I will say that Valeria as a character is a little not super well none of the characters as characters are extremely, I think, well defined. You get the basics that you need. Valeria cares about her daughter. She cares about her family. She cares about law and order. So you definitely get enough to, I was never puzzled and like, why is she doing this? It's very clear what she's doing. But in terms of like depth, there wasn't a lot to dig into. She's a cop. She's doing her job. She stands for law and order. There you go.
Yeah. Would you say they adhere to archetypes fairly closely? You got plucky Latina lady cop. You got good and good brother partner, you got slightly crooked cop but does what he has to do to get the job done, sort of, like they sort of fit archetypes you'd expect to see in a cop story, and in a way I think sometimes those are storytelling shorthands. Even this opening scene where she's doing the jiu-jitsu, the BJJ, is to show off, hey, she's capable, she's competent, and she gets absolutely smashed later on. Like that big dude just throws around like a rag doll. She's not Wonder Woman by any stretch of the imagination. She wins the fight through pluckiness and determination.
Mike did a very good job with that. It's one of the strengths here is, and it's a shame that this has to be brought up in the current year, that doing a basic setup of, hey, I set this up earlier and there's going to be a payoff later, and this character is not a Mary Sue who can just defeat hordes of thugs with just her plucky womanness.
That dude was massive. I couldn't have taken him down with a baseball bat and 10 friends. He was an absolute beast.
She earns it. She earns the win, and Mike set it up, and because he knows how to set the it's a basic kind of a writing thing.
I think the weakest part of the writing was transitioning into that scene, just where they went from being in the crowd with the two cops, the one getting shot and the one getting stomped out. Literally, that was like the hardest transition, where it just felt kind of like forced. Like, I don't know. That didn't logically make sense to me. They just murdered two cops, and they're like, we'd murder you too. Like, you know,
I'm
it's
surprised
like
that- I'm
they
surprised he didn't
probably just
finish the
murder
job.
them right then.
Yeah,
You know, that was the only thing that felt kind of forced. Just like transitioning them from getting out of the cop car and then getting into the diner or whatever where she fights the big guy.
It's tricky sometimes. You write yourself into these corners, and it's like, well, I've got A and B here, and I want to get to D, but I don't want to include C. But that's the natural progression. Like, it naturally would make sense. They would have just executed her. There's no reason to keep her alive. They have the mayor, so that's really, they keep him alive to get what they want. It would have been great if there could have been some reason why she was kept alive, whether one of the dudes that's there, she like helped him with his probation or whatever, and he's just like, oh no, I got this chick, I'm not gonna, like, doesn't let her get executed or whatever because she's not that bad, or
go more evil with it. Because the guy at that point,
don't go there.
No, I'm serious. Like, she's the female,
you're right,
and the evil thugs are looking at her with, like, lust in their eyes. Like, it's pretty easy. You can just set it up. I'll save her for later. Like, that's all you gotta do.
That's it. You got it.
I mean,
or
just if she had just quickly like fought her way through the crowd while that guy sacrificed himself and had the little fight before he got like beaten up, and then before they shoot the main cop, and like, it just could have been smoother.
I was actually more
like, I felt like at that point they were trying to have like the shooter guy like preach, kind of. And just show how, like, I don't know. That was where they were showing, like, oh, this guy isn't even a real gangster. He's just some, like, punk or some shit, And
I enjoyed
punking over his head.
So often these guys are like, oh, I'm on your side. And they're like, I don't see you down here in the ghetto. I don't see you missing out on opportunities because of the color of your skin. I don't see you doing any of that. You're a college boy from, he even said, where you from? Where you from? Where you from? When he finally admitted, he goes, yeah, that's what I thought, college boy. You got these ideas in your head from your professors. They're not your original thoughts. You didn't look at the plight of the black man and say, look, I want to help out, and if you're looking to help fight some sort of injustice, you see, and it ends up with you putting a bullet in someone's head, if you're not the Punisher, you're in the wrong. Like, he's going, I want to help all people that are worse off than me. It's like, that's kind of elitist. And second of all, how does that equate to you killing cops? So this college boy Antifa type terrorist, domestic terrorist, he's just using an excuse to do what he wants to do. I'd be curious to know whether or not he really believes, well, like a lot of them in real life. I often talk about this with my wife. We talk about political issues and stuff. She says, do you really think these people believe what they're saying? Or is it just, are they just saying it to get along? Is it political blue face? I've got to look blue enough to get along with everybody so I can keep working, so I can not be like, how many of these really believe?
So the answer to your question, and this is kind of explored in the book, the ones on the street, the kids who killed the cops, they believed it. The people in power are just saying whatever buzzwords, because like the mayor didn't believe anything he said.
No, and he even admitted it later on.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't believe it. Now I will say what this puts a very interesting. This, in my opinion, is one of the more interesting things that actually happens in the book, is when the BLM Antifa kind of guy is saying, "I'm on your side," to like the gangster, and what's interesting there is that there's this kind of implication that the honest to goodness thug is preferable to the cops.
Because at least they're honest.
Because they're honest. I'm a bad guy. I do bad things. So at least we know where the lines are.
Yeah.
But the politicians and the people who are actively subverting law and order are actually worse. And that, like, for Valeria Baca, she would rather deal with the honest, tried and true criminals who are out to steal and kill than deal with the people who are there to burn, riot, in the name of justice, or pretending to be on your side while also cutting your funding, like the mayor does. So this is definitely about a broken system, a broken country, a broken society.
There's a lot of social commentary, it sounds like, throughout the entire work.
Yes.
But for the main protagonist, Wilberforce was asking earlier, is it explored a little bit why she seems like such a figure of duty, or are there personal conflicts that are also unfurled throughout the story? Anything to give sense to what her motivation is, why she became
much. Not really. She has a daughter, and the sort of shorthand is, she cares about her family, right? She cares about protecting her daughter. She then, protects the community. It's kind of an extension of her parenting, I would say. But other than that sort of, subtle kind of implication that you get through the just seeing her be a good parent. There's not a lot, I would say.
Yeah.
If there's
Am I
some sort of-
incorrect? That's
No,
Yeah.
definitely. There's
I
not
agree.
really more character development than that.
But would you guys say that she has a flat character arc as opposed to a positive or negative character arc? A flat character arc
Yeah.
being like something like Batman or James Bond. At the end of a movie, unless it's an origin movie, Batman doesn't tend to be very different from where he was at the start of the movie. He might have a few more scars, a few more fighting skills, and be a bit more wary of clowns and grease paint, but he's not generally too much different than he was at the beginning. James Bond doesn't tend to grow too much as a character. He's always the same sort of awesome chauvinistic backflipping using twin Uzis, like he's got all the good stuff going on. I think it's okay not to have too much depth when you've got these flat character arcs, because the person they are at the beginning is pretty much who they are at the end. She might have, like, she's changed her priorities, but that doesn't necessarily change who she is as a person. She still has the same values, the same morals, the same ethics. She's just like, I'm going to move to Kentucky and take it easy over there with 3Js, because who wants to deal with this hassle all the time? But that works better. I got to agree with you guys. It works better when you do have that explicit motivation. Just a little bit of Pixar in the early stages. Even if she'd said something like what Tut was saying, this is my daughter, she's part of the community. Like, they burnt down the kid's school, like stuff like that. If that sort of stuff had happened earlier, and she could sort of link it in saying, well, this is my daughter, she's part of the community, I protect her, I protect the community. If she'd done that sort of thing where they walk down the street and everyone's like, hey, Valerian, hey, Mr. Eduardo, you got any new apples? You know, that sort of thing where they interact with the people. You can see she's part of the community and it matters to her, especially since she is Latina, and that's, you know, the very community-minded, very family-minded sort of characters and storytelling. You could have edged into that a little bit, but it's a big book. It's absolutely jam-packed, and it really reads a lot like. But when I say you make a great movie, I don't mean that as a. There's always
it reads like
a
a movie.
It reads like a movie.
Yeah.
Very Assault on Precinct 13. You know, that constant escalation. Even the Resident Evil movies. You know how they just go like from action bit to action bit. You know, like there's a bit of a slow start at the beginning and laying stuff out. And slow's not bad. You know, that's the pace that it needs. And then it kicks up and you're just like, oh shit's got real, and it just does not stop all the way to the end. And I like that pacing.
If I could, I want to go back to just to kind of end on the question about motivation. In the way I see Thin Blue Line, it is a message-driven story rather than a character-driven story. That's how I read it. And the message is very loud and clear. Like, you get it by the time you're done. So if anything, like, it's not like this book has nothing to say. It has a lot to say, and it says it very clearly and very strongly, but it is a message-driven work. It is not a character-driven work. And I think that speaks to the strengths and the weaknesses of the book, because when you look at the characters, for example, the mayor, whose dialogue reads straight from headlines of a collection of political people that Mike, I would assume, disagrees with, you can say, oh, well, there's a certain realism to that, but there's no depth or real character to that mayor. He's a stand-in. He's an allegory. He's a stand-in for these people, these politicians. There is a one-to-one allegory of George Soros in this. They just put a different name on him. Yeah. And he's the one financing the protests and making sure that there's pallets of bricks to throw. So
do you think this could be seen as educational in that regard then? The fact that they are such clear allegories, are such clear one-to-one. I mean, I think the people who read this are already thinking in this way, they're already on this side of the political spectrum, so to speak. There's no dangerhead lefty's going to pick this up and go, yeah, Mike Barron, he made Punisher. He helped develop the early character of Punisher. Punisher wouldn't be who he was without Mike Barron. He'd still be taking shots at Spider-Man.
What do you think, Admiral? Would you like to pick up that question? How do you think a leftist would take to reading this story? Would they be able to absorb and understand any of the messaging here? Or
no, I think they would just shut down. As far as like reading this, I don't know. It's a little more heavy-handed, less nuanced. And I will say, though, that like Kimo was saying, it really, even though I did say, like, I didn't expect it to be so political and on the nose when Mike was promoting it, like, as, like, more pure entertainment, it did read very quickly. Like, there was no lack of, my focus when I was actually reading the thing.
So the vehicle for the messaging is still an intense action-packed driven storyline, essentially.
So yeah, whereas like that's why I think the strongest part of it was the humanization of the cop, and just that she is kind of a person. She is a flat character throughout. She's kind of an every lady or every man, type character.
Mhm.
But I think that works well for if you do kind of see past the political stuff. I mean, I think all of us are mostly in line with kind of this political message that this was all kind of insanity during this
I mean,
time.
I don't know. You can look at that and say, yeah, that was a good thing that happened.
Yeah.
And they mentioned the Chaz in here, that
Yeah.
autonomous zone. Where people died. That was chaos. The stuff that was coming in, the amount of rapes that happened in that during that time, because it's absolute lawlessness. So you take away those blinkers, those guardrails, and mankind just goes complete savage, complete animal mode.
Well,
know?
Yes.
I want to go
So
back
I
to
wasn't expecting as much of that, but yeah, I mean, if you can read past that, there is something of it that's just like practical, and that she's just a family woman who's trying to like take care of her own family, working a job, which is like an impossible job. Like the job that we give cops nowadays is totally
And you
like
see that. You
an
see how
impossible thing to do.
they keep
You
taking
have
stuff
to
away
have
from
that. You have to have that self-control, as well as like the ability to enforce like order.
I want to go back
I don't
for
know.
just a second to what Admiral's saying regarding one thing I saw as a strength here is to me the best moments from a storytelling perspective were the suspense. The sort of like, they're in this really dire situation. How are they going to get out of it? The sort of tactical, like how they're moving from one place to another, the decisions they're making. It's very grounded and gritty. The one moment that I would say that is a heroism moment is essentially the sort of payoff to the jujitsu thing, when she gets to kind of do she does a couple of moves. The most of the book is essentially them making very small decisions in this very impossible situation to try and get out alive and get the mayor out alive. So like I said, very grounded, gritty storytelling, and the suspense that's generated from that, regardless of the character depth, which really isn't there, that's solid. That works pretty well. So from an entertainment perspective, even if you aren't in tune with the political messaging here, which I still think is very important to have as a part of a conversation. The left tell their stories all the time. So the fact that, hey, here's someone who's coming at it from a different angle. This is a necessary book. But from an entertainment perspective, you do get the suspense of, the precinct, assault on precinct 13 or whatever. You get that is delivered.
What about the climax, the payoff? Do you think it culminates in a satisfactory way? You can take that up, Kimosabi.
Thanks.
You wanted to make a point.
I do. It, just real quick, what Phil was saying, I agree with him that it does entertain on its own, and I think the way that you can prove that is if you took out the political message and changed them for a mob. It's the mob. If you took all the protests and everything, and the politicians, took all the political elements out of it, and just made it like a new mob boss comes into town, says, "No, the cops aren't taking our bribes. We're going to kill them all," and they do this huge assault on all the cops, and there's the riots and everything. If you made it crime-based as opposed to social justice-based, it would still be an entertaining story. The beats work. It just happens to have, it's just being hung on a political frame. If you hung it on criminals are bad guys, a frame which is political in itself, it would still work. So I think that backs up what Twitless is saying, that it is a successful story in that regard. In terms of the ending of the story, what I liked about it, again, back in what Twitless is saying, is it was very grounded. It was very real. Right at the very end of the story, the little girl's like, "Mom, are we moving?" She's like, "Yeah, I think we are. Like, I think we're going to take that job off. We're going to move to Kentucky where it's chill. Just take things easy. We're not going to, we won't have this over there. We don't have to deal with this. We don't have to deal with wondering whether I'm going to come home alive every night." I mean, I know every cop family struggles with that, but not every cop family has to deal with riots and set up riots by, oligarchs who just fund all this money into getting people. You can see the Soros standing, smiling wider and wider as more and more stuff's going to chaos. Like, he's just loving it. He's loving that his plan is coming to fruition.
Yep.
Well,
And
we
I
do
gotta
have
say,
to
like,
move. Sorry, go
my
ahead.
favorite bit of the whole thing, and I wonder if it's the favorite panel for you guys as well, is when the girl called I'm so sexist. female politician calls not George Soros and says, "Oh, my opponent's 15 years cop experience. He's just absolutely smashed me in the polls. I need some help. I need some rights and stuff." And he's like, "Yeah, you're too easy. I'll sort that out." And he says, "After all," she says, "Thanks so much for your help." And he says, "That's fine. After all," and the camera zooms right out to show his massive palatial mansion. He says, "After all, we're on the same side." And it's like so obvious that he is not on any of these people's side. He doesn't even reside anywhere near their spheres. He is, like unto a financial god within this nation, Mammon. And he's like, "Oh, no, I'm totally on your side. We're all on the same side. We're all in this together." You're not in this together, motherfucker. You're sitting in a mansion at the top of fucking Beverly Hills somewhere. Like you are evil and you're propagating
the bigger enemy here that Mike is pointing out, and this is something that crosses lines between left and right. The left-right messaging, very heavy, and I would say does get heavy-handed at times. But I would say the place where there's common ground, and I think this is the strength of the book, is that, again, the criminal is not as bad as the hypocrites. Yep. Hypocrisy here, and there's one of my favorite pages for the message was this is on page 46. Is the mayor is being a hypocrite, and he's talking about how he's going to cut the budget for the police. I mean, meanwhile, there's some guys pointing out and saying, "Hey, we need to get rid of some of these dangerous protesters," and the officer caught in the middle says, "I can't. I don't have enough men. You cut the amount of men I have to do what you're asking me to do." And so the real enemy here being the hypocrites the hypocrites like the mayor who say one thing, "Oh yes, we're going to defund the police," and then they get in the police car and say, "Well, we're not really going to defund the police," and then 10 minutes later, "We're actually just going to cut the police force by 10%. It's going to make your jobs a whole lot harder."
You can't.
Yeah.
Admiral, did you want to make a last point on the climax? We do have to move along to the next book.
Oh, sure.
We had one more.
Yeah, no, I think it was kind of anticlimactic in that it just kind of peered off, fed into the next book, if you wanted to make a second book where she's in the new department and all that. But it was a little anticlimactic. I think it was good that they were showing, kind of the programming you listen to informs your opinion. She's listening to the news and they just change it to whatever the game show. I think there's a famous Barry Crimmins quote that was like, if people just listen to the radio and listen to music instead of listening to the news, they'd probably be a lot better off. And it's like that type of thing. So I like that. Other than that, I think that's mostly all I really had to say about that one.
Cool. Could I make a couple? I want to make just a very, very quick couple art.
Oh, yeah. And then also the worst thing about it is the hypocrisy. There's a famous Norm Macdonald joke about that. If you ever want to look it up, the hypocrisy normally isn't the worst part of the crime. Yeah. No.
Let's keep it terse. Let's keep it terse, Twitless. We have one more.
Yes.
Book okay. So I'll be very. The biggest criticism I have about the art is the both coloring and line work. So I can put that together. It's a little. I would say I'm apathetic towards it. It's serviceable, but it doesn't really stand. It doesn't do anything super bad that I would say stands out. It doesn't do anything really good that stands out. I feel like this book, I'd appreciate it if there had been a stronger sense of style in some of the choices being made. It's a very ground level story, but I feel like for a book like this, you could pan back, give me a bird's eye view if the city's on fire, give me things to really remember. Kimasabi mentioned there being kind of a cinematic flow to things that applies to the sequencing of the story. And again, it plays out kind of it's easy to read, so you could hand this to anybody and they'd get the story really well, but it doesn't really play to the strengths of the language of comics. It's very serviceable, and there's strengths to that because it's very easily readable. But in terms of like what comics can really do with telling a story and panel breakdowns and the language of comics versus the language of cinema, this one definitely leans more into the language of cinema. What this ultimately means is that there's less that stands out. And so that really
that's an excellent point to leave off on, the language of comics, because I think the next book speaks the language of comics quite effectively.
Yes.
So now we have the other book that we wanted to discuss tonight, The People, also a street justice, crime-ridden city themed story with I don't know how you would compare this protagonist to the one in Thin Blue Line. Would you like to start there, Kimosabe? What did you think of the protagonist of The People versus Valeria Baca from Thin Blue Line?
His motivations, he's got that typical vigilante mindset. There's this idea that there's right and there's wrong. And if you do wrong, I'll come after you because that's right. It's very, very black and white. And a lot of vigilantes have that mentality. Again, Punisher, you're guilty, you're dead. And people say, what if Punisher was real? Like, I wouldn't be worried because I don't even cheat on my tax. So he's not going to bother me. And they're like, oh, what if he changed his mind? What if he decides tax cheats? He's not that sort of guy. He's not that guy. So this guy's very black and white, very straightforward. I have had the good fortune to see the script for The People before it became a comic book. And I've also had the good fortune to see other future The People works in script form before comic books. And I know that it does delve into his actual specific history and motivation in the next book. So if he has got that black and white mentality that vigilantes have, which I think that's a strength of the genre. Like if Batman's going to go into shades of grey, if he's like, oh, maybe I won't break this drug dealer's arm. I don't know if that's the book I want to read. I did a review on a book just recently called State of Cain, and that's the whole point. The whole point is the dealer's like, I got no other game left to play. Like you come in here every week and you bust me up for dealing drugs, but I got nothing else I can do. You're not fixing the problem, vigilante man. And so then he's got to sort of start looking at, well, what can I do to make hurting someone for slanging isn't fixing the problem. It's not making the drugs go away. The crackheads are going to find the crack somewhere else. If you take this dude off a corner, he gets replaced within a minute. So there is a big story to be told there. I don't know if I want that Shades of Grey story from Batman, and I don't want it from The People, and I don't get that. I get black and white, right and wrong. This dude he's Jack, but he's a regular dude. He doesn't have superpowers. He's just a dude with a gadget baseball bat and American face paint, sitting around kicking bad guys in the side of the head. I'm here for it.
I don't know. I feel like those abs are a superpower.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Did you want to pick up on the point of the language of comics until Admiral gets back and gives us his thoughts, Twiddless?
Okay, give me a second. Let me pull up my notes here. So The People, I was gushing over some of this. Not only did I not see any gaps that needed to be filled, where I was like, oh, I needed a panel there. Some usages, many I actually would say that I think it's Dan Dahl who did the breakdowns.
Yeah, he's so good.
He knows what he is doing. He knows how to structure a sequence and make panels rhyme with each other. There are panels that actually have, like I said, it's like poetry. They rhyme. Different pages will play with different panel setups to reinforce ideas, and it's a real treat. There's some sequences that look like we're watching them through a viewfinder. There's some borderless panels that are literally being sketched by a court sketch artist. And so it's literally like, it's the point of view of the person who is drawing the comic and he's drawing it and he's actually in the story. He's a court sketch artist. So it even makes sense from a storytelling perspective. So it's just
let's see
moments like that, just really well done.
Admiral, do you want to hold up your copy? Go ahead, Twiddless. Keep making.
Yeah, this is real language of comics stuff, where you're using how comics can tell a story through panels and through panel structuring to uniquely utilize the art form. And I was very impressed by how the sequencing and panel layouts and everything were done.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Alan Alonso actually did the layouts, and then Dan Dahl did all the actual art.
I thought it was the other way around. There you go.
Yeah, Alan Alonso does amazing layouts. You can see his incredibly creative layouts also in the Magic Cop Ashcan. He has some crazy layouts that he does where all the panels bleed together and stuff, and just the way he layers things is really interesting.
It's great stuff.
How did this book read for you, Admiral? After having read Thin Blue Line, what was your takeaway for The People?
I like this definitely more. Like, it was more my speed, a little more escapism. It's very Daredevil meets some,
it's like a Captain America,
Kate Jones a little bit, and there's the detective aspect. When he is reading how they did, let's see if I can find this in here, where they did all the paneling, where he's actually finding the serial killer stuff. I thought that came across well. Basically, I think Phil just did a good job of describing it from like the serial killer perspective, which
It's real
was
Sin City, real Sin City
very,
vibes there.
yeah, Sin City, Edgar Allan Poe mix like type thing. Yeah, it's good.
And it's like, I know in Phil's scripts, he has direction. He'll say, panel 1, this sort of thing, then 3 panels showing this. So he gives enough freedom. He's smart enough to give enough freedom to the artists for them to put a bit of their own inflection in it as well. Like, he definitely has control over what's happening, but he'll say a whole page of this, but if you think 2 pages is fine, if you can make 2 pages work, do 2 pages. And he gives them that flexibility. And I think it's a real strength of a writer to not go full Alan Moore and prescribe every single angle and every single beat and every single, how many panel. If you've read any of Alan Moore's scripts, you know just how tight they are and rambling. And I don't think that necessarily leads to better artwork. I mean, if Phil had tightened up this script even more, will we necessarily have got the language of comics coming through as strong as it is in this book? I don't know. I don't think so.
So what is the conflict established here? In Thin Blue Line, they were trying to protect the mayor, and the city was going insane and with riots. What exactly is the protagonist? What is this conflict?
So he's basically serving out street justice, but now there's someone serving out street justice in a more judicial way, judge, jury, executioner. So he has to kind of figure out, who's doing that, and then the other main plot line is that there's a senator's son who's up for murder. Just kind of a entitled playboy type, and he's investigating that, and then how it connects to all this. And he's being mirrored by the silhouette, which you can kind of see in the actual comic itself if you look at how they do the shadowing of the people in it before he comes into these 2 encounters with the silhouette. So yeah, I don't know. It's basically just juxtaposing the different levels of justice that people want to dish out, kind of like that first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one shot with Raphael and Casey Jones, where it's like the different levels of where you're going to take your vigilante justice to.
That was a common theme between the 2 books, by the way, was the fact that you had the rich, powerful elites who essentially were just running roughshod over everyone else. And them being seen as kind of like the evil, even beyond evil. It's like serial killers are one thing, we can deal with those, but people who actively subvert our society and make it so that the good guys can't, or the law and order can't do its job, or they're hamstrung, while also being worse than those criminals. So both of these books have that sort of broken society and hypocritical, disgusting elites. So that is a common thread, and I think it's a common thread we're seeing as a cultural movement here. Yeah, so it's definitely something. Both of these books are angry at the system, specifically how the elites abuse it. So I think that's a common thread between both.
And even if you're the biggest Elon Musk fanboy, he still wants to put chips in everyone's head. Like, there's none of these guys with all this money, none of these guys sitting there and going, what does Lee want? What does Lee want? How can I make Lee's life better? No, they're like, how can I maximize potential investment return on, and we're all side effects of that. We're all collateral to that. And if we go along with it, fine. And if not, too bad, you're on the scrap heap of history. So there's none of these big elite guys are altruistic, I don't believe in. And I think, again, that's societal. That's people, more and more people are seeing that. They're more divided over that than ever. I remember second last year of high school, we were talking about Bill Gates being fantastic because he gave away his entire fortune, $69 billion. There's a lot of money back then. Now Elon's pulling in 220 a year, makes it look like jump change. But I remember even in Australia, people talking about Bill Gates gave away his entire fortune, and then the joke was he had it all back the next day, like he'd made it back. And if you ask anybody in Australia up until sort of the pandemic type stuff happened, where he started sounding off on some crazy bullshit about depopulating the planet, you ask almost any Australian that's aware of his philanthropy, his charity, and every Australian saying, "No, Bill Gates, he was a good dude. He gave away all that money to charity, to nebulous charity."
So does that speak to like a universal language where the commonality of the disenfranchised makes for ideal heroic settings? Is that where the people and Valeria find common ground, that they are among the people?
It
I
doesn't.
think
It
it's more
doesn't.
pronounced in the people
Yeah.
because he's directly going and meeting with these folks in court and seeing justice not done. Even with like the senator's father, he wants to meet the sketch artist because he wants his son to look good in the paper. He doesn't really care about the outcome of the trial because it's already like preordained in his mind because they just have enough wealth to get out of all this bullshit. So,
And the character's
What did
name,
you
We
think?
the People, like it's, he wants to represent
Right.
the will of the people, or the disenfranchisement of the people, the ability for the people to strike back unseen, uncategorized, uncatalogued. We can't do it. There's a fucking smart camera on the light pole outside my house. I can look at it. It's looking right at me. Short of getting a grinder and taking it down, I can't do anything about that. But this guy, he represents the people. He can do that. He can hit back.
So it's
What did
different.
you think, Twitless?
Yeah, it's different and it's similar. So the similarity is the fact that both stories have the sort of like street level person who is faced with great injustice and kind of, trying to do even resist the tide of lawlessness and death and chaos. What's interesting is because The People is a superhero story, it can play into what the superhero narrative has done since its beginning, which is be a power fantasy about how a common man can strike back and actually, deal real justice, make that real kind of change. Whereas the kind of, I would say, sober thought that ends Thin Blue Line is the fact that despite Valeria's moment of heroism, the only thing she can really do to change anything is to move. She can't be Superman. She can't swoop in and save the day. All she can really do is do her job, make small moments of small heroisms that everyday people can do, but then really just kind of live her best life that protects her family. So both of them deal with similar societal problems. The superhero fantasy enables us to imagine that we can really I can take it power into my own hands and do something about it. Whereas Thin Blue Line is a much more, I think, a sobering kind of contemplation on the realities of living in a broken system.
They seem like very different pills to swallow, but are both expressive of things that people probably experience in those situations when they're disenfranchised and they feel powerless.
They could exist simultaneously too. I mean, We the People could exist in the same world and vice versa. There's nothing so outrageous that this couldn't be happening in a sister city in another state.
Well, so what about Climax? What is the moral of the story when it comes to the people? How do things culminate?
So basically how things culminate is that he enhances the footage of the second encounter he had where the senator's son tried to pick up that one prostitute. And then he enhances the footage and he's able to see the silhouette. So we know that the next book is going to be a confrontation between him and the silhouette, unless they change what they're going to do. But it does say next the people versus the silhouette.
Yeah.
So
And he does continue the parallels between the two characters, or the juxtaposition of, you don't have the right to take a life, and if I don't take a life, he will take other lives. So I'm doing a good thing here. This is a net good, and they clash ideologically as well as physically. So it's like everything. I don't know how he does it. Everything Phil does is it really is. It's a blueprint. If you're not an ex-pro, if you're not got deep pockets, doing stuff the way that bless you.
thank you.
You done? All right, cool. The way that
One more for the road.
the way that he set up the characters in the Lost Pages, and then had all of his spin-offs. Like every time he brings out a new character or a new Ashcan or whatever, I say to him, because I talk to him, I'm like, I think this is going to be people's favorite character. When I read the Silhouette story, Lost Pages 2, I gave him this huge talk about how it was reminiscent of Stan Lee in the way that he would, within a single issue, I mean, he has more pages to work with than Stan Shaw, but within a single issue, Stan would have Spider-Man going through some personal shit, some dude getting hit by lightning and getting powers, deciding to be a bad guy with it, initial encounter, Spidey gets worked, Spidey gets smart, comes on back, takes a dude down. There's also a moral implication there, and there's also him either overcoming his personal issue for that issue or sinking even further into that. Paul Lock Parker. And he do it all within the space of a single issue. And that's what he's done in Lost Pages 2. This one reads more like an ash can, like an old backup in Marvel Comics Presents, where it's like, hey, we got this character, it's called The People. We think you're going to like him. Admittedly, it's 28 pages. You probably could have done this story in 10 pages less, but you would have had to cut out a lot of the action. And I think in a cinematic, post-cinematic world, like we want stuff, more battles. We don't want one hit of quitters. We want to see the characters do some kicks and some flips and some throws. Like Jack Kirby did some fantastic fights between Captain America and Batroc back in the day, where it's just 9 or 12 panels on a page, and these guys just beating the hell out of each other.
So I do have a couple criticisms. I don't want to just gush about this. Although, like I said, I had a lot of positive things to say, especially in terms of language of comic stuff, which I'm very happy to see. But there were a couple of things I think. One of them is very minor. When it came to trying to come up with critiques, I had to try in a couple points to be like, okay, I got to find something to critique here. So the last sequence where he's like he's finding the silhouette. Sequence made sense, but it was like, this is a sequence where a guy is dialing up contrast on a monitor. And so I was like, it's not the most exciting thing to kind of, end your book on. So it was a minor critique there, perhaps. The other critique I would make is that I felt like there was a little bit of maybe a thematic contradiction. The character looks straight out of a 90s image, like Shadowhawk and Spawn and stuff. And he paints himself. He's bare-chested, combat boots, and a bat. And so he's clearly not Batman. He doesn't have the gadgets or the sort of social refinement and grace. But the moments where he's doing his detective work, he just sounds like Bruce Wayne. And there's a couple of shots and panels that are very clearly evocative. He's just trying to be Bruce Wayne. So I was just going, well, is this guy supposed to be the sort of a higher end James Bond Batman type character? Or is he supposed to be the sort of violent Rob Liefeld, I'm just beating the crap out? Yeah, exactly. And
well,
so
he is a Batman. He has a bat.
I'm owned. You got me.
Yeah.
Again, in the second book, it goes into who he is and why he's the way that he is, and I think that it might answer some of those questions. Now, whether or not it was smart to include that in the second book or not the first, that's up for debate. I mean, each creator's got to make their own choices, but I think I think you'd be happy with some of the answers you get in the next book.
I'm just saying, as a point of criticism, I would say that I did occur to me at a certain point. I was like, it feels like this guy is two characters, and I was having a hard time reconciling the two. That's honestly, like I said, that's about all I really had to critique. It's really. Actually, I had a couple other things that were minor regarding the artwork.
There are moments where he's very like superhero, and there's moments where he's very human. And it's not exactly equal.
We're gonna have to put a pin on it, though, unless you guys have some quick statements. We do have guests in the back, so
I can keep it fast. I can do it real fast. I felt like the artwork very good, but I feel like the artwork in The People was stronger when it was stark blacks and whites. When the artwork gets into the scenes that are kind of like during the daytime, there's this sort of like gray stippling kind of going on, and I didn't care for it. Lean more into the Sin City stuff. That stuff was really good. But if we're gonna channel Frank Miller, you dial that up. But that's about all I had to say regarding that the artwork.
Okay. So with that, serving up street justice, let's bring on our two comic warriors. Please welcome Mike Barron and Phil Diaz.
What's up?
Hey,
Nicholas gloves, love it.
Sorry for the wait time there. Had to hold you guys up for just a few minutes.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Who's speaking?
Well,
I see you, Phil.
hey, what's up? Well, Red is speaking, the host.
Hey,
Yeah.
Well read.
Hi.
Can we see what you look like?
Sure. Here's
What?
my.
No, I don't want to see.
Right, give rule the illusion.
So I'm a big green blob, as you can see.
I always thought he was a rabbit.
Yeah. No, the illusion is dead. I'm a green blob. Yeah, gentlemen, thank you for being here. It was great discussing your work. It was interesting that both of you both wanted to tell stories about harsh realities of what you felt were injustices in society, particularly where a strong criminal element is present and there's a disorder in society. Twitless mentioned a lot that hypocrisy among elites and leaders seemed to be a very common theme for both of your books. But both of you took different approaches to set that environment and to tell your story. And I'm curious where each of you were motivated to decide to tell your respective perspective on that theme. Mike, what really drove you initially to write Thin Blue Line, and why did you feel that the story had to be told the way that you told it?
My number one goal is to entertain. It's my curse to write heterodox stories. And by heterodox, I mean stories that are not part of the popular mainstream. 10 or 20 years ago, it would not have been controversial. The reason I wrote the story is because millions of others, like I watched TV during the summer of 2020, cities burning down in flames, thousands of small businesses destroyed, thousands of lives destroyed. And out front, there was always some idiot saying these are mostly peaceful protests.
Mm.
And then politicians, people who had sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law, started to call for defunding the police. And my response was incredulity. Do these people not understand anything? Civilization depends on the rule of law. Without the rule of law, there's no civilization. Now, we all know there are bad cops. I don't deny there are bad cops, but that's not what the story is about. I know a number of police officers, and the cops I know are, to a person, civic minded individuals who join the force to be a positive force in their community. And I felt that this side of events had not been portrayed. We had not seen what police had endured during these summers. Now, if you follow the news, you know that police departments are quitting en masse, that police suicides are up over 100%, and that some of our major cities, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, and Chicago, are ghost towns. People are afraid to go downtown because crime is out of control. This is the stuff of drama. There's a reason that police, detective, and medical shows and legal shows have dominated popular entertainment for the last half century, is because all those professions deal with the stuff of life and death, and that's the stuff of drama. So there was for me. There was to pick up. So I did it.
And I suppose very few other people would have had the chutzpah to do that. Even if they saw it there laying there and they said, oh, you know what? I don't want that heat. But you're Mike Barron. So here we are talking about your book.
Well, and Phil, did you also pick up on some of those threads of inspiration when you were writing your story, or was yours maybe coming from a different place when you came up with the theme for the plot for The People?
Well, we had the character's first appearance in a series of shorts that I did a couple of years ago. It was a 4-page short to introduce the character, and readers seemed to like that character most out of the kind of the new fold that were in those shorts. And the premise came from my buddy Adam Lawson. He's like, I really like that People character. You should do a crossover between him and Silhouette. And I'm like, that's perfect. It's like almost Daredevil Punisher, type storyline. But as from pulling from reality for that, I think for people that have read it, you could see a little bit of that in the actual antagonist of the story, the senator and the senator's son. That's kind of the most political the story goes, and you have this kind of like a rich, untouchable figure, and his son who is being tried for murdering prostitutes allegedly, and how they could just get away with it by paying off whoever in the judicial system. And so that's kind of where I was pulling from a reality aspect.
It sounds very, very protagonist driven then. Whereas Mike, it sounded like you really wanted to have some social commentary. And did you also think that the protagonist should drive a lot of what what was occurring around in terms of the ways that you were exploring those questions of what was happening in society?
Well, these protagonists are mostly reactive. They're not driving events. They got a job to protect the mayor. I see. I have Phil's book here somewhere. He sent it to me. I'm looking through this big pile of shit on my desk. I can't find it.
Love to know what you think of it. Give us
I
your
already
read
told
on
Phil
it.
what I thought of it. I was very impressed.
Thank you, Mike.
How would
I
you
think there's a
compare it
parallel
to-
there between the way that cops have to be reactive in their job. It's very difficult for them to be proactive because then they get accused of heavy-handed policing and categorizing people and saying, "Oh, well, you're this or you're that, so you must be about to commit a crime. You look like this or you dress like that."
Yeah.
sorry, I guess you're digging it up. Yeah.
That
That's
definitely
all
is
right, boys.
something
No.
that's a
don't
stark
think I-
contrast between the books. Is that whereas in Thin Blue Line you have to be reactive to the crime,
Sure.
in The People, it's someone who is taking it upon themselves to be proactive towards the crime.
How do you think the character from The People would respond to the events in Thin Blue Line? Where would you be able to mix those two circumstances and approaches? One is, a very real response, a sobering at the end, and the other one is a justice fantasy. So, is there any room for a character like the people in a story like Thin Blue Line?
Well, that's up to Phil. He writes his characters and I write mine.
Sure, but I feel like if in like that situation, like you have a more like riot scenario and stuff like that. I feel like the people is trying to get to the core of the issue. Maybe it would be, I don't know how I write that, but
He'd
He
go
just
after the
tries to
George
save
Soros.
as many lives as possible. He just tries
I
to
feel like-
save as many lives as possible.
I feel like he'd end up going after the George Soros guy who's behind it all.
that's what I was getting at. Like he's
Maybe
more of
next
like,
week. But right now.
yeah, but in the moment, right? I'm sure. Yeah, there it is. Oh, Mike, thank you.
Very cool.
Yeah, in the moment, you save as many people as possible, and then he's part character of, like you were talking about, the detective aspect to him, where he's investigating, hunting down what is the cause of this, who's at the top, who's actually behind this stuff, and then bringing that person to justice, or what that is in his eyes.
And that sounds like untenable goals for a police officer. Like, do we have heroes like the people in the police force, or is it all just very, very limited by what the scope of what's possible, humanly possible?
Well, yeah, I mean, the people is the guy that's gonna go above the law in a good way, on to bring down these criminals. So obviously, you see he breaks into someone's apartment, trespasses to get information and stuff like that. That's more of, I don't know if your beat cop would do that. More of stuff you'd see in like detective movies that high level detectives would do, I guess.
They're
Phil's
heroes
book
too, aren't
is
they?
a vigilante story.
Right.
The officers, though, they're heroes too, aren't they? Aren't they capable of superhuman feats? The people that went into the buildings at 9/11, isn't there a bit of that spirit in them?
Americans have always loved vigilantes. Charles
Yep.
Bronson in Death Wish,
Yeah.
Dirty Harry, Wyatt Earp, the men who tamed the West. There was no law out there. The explorers went first. There was no law unless you made law. Vigilantes have a long and honorable tradition in American history and in fiction. My new book, Private American, is about a vigilante.
I have a question for both panelists. Let's see if I can articulate this. I detected a spirit of, I don't know if I'd call it anger, but definitely a spirit of dissatisfaction with the current system. And I feel like there's a commonality, a cultural commonality, both left and right. Different reasons. But the left will say society is broken, and the right will say society is broken. Is there a path forward for both left and right to start having a conversation if they both recognize how busted up society is and they're all mad about it? Because there's, in both of your works, it's the real villains were the the people, but the hypocrites behind the scenes who are profiting from all of this? Is that a path forward to help bring both left and right to the table and talk? Is to kind of address the fact that yes, we all agree the society is broken and the elites are screwing us over.
Isn't that what Occupy Wall Street was? Everybody got together and said, you know what? These rich some bitches got us over a barrel. Let's do something about it. And then all of a sudden, all these social justice programs, the progressive stack and everything started turning up. It started turning up in your work and in your schools. And now we're all fighting each other instead of getting our eyes on the prize. Like, we're not each other's enemies. We might have political differences, but people have always had political differences. You've been able to go to a barbecue with a guy that votes blue if you vote red and vice versa. You can't do that anymore. I'm not American, obviously, but that's just how I see it.
Yeah. When can a man not go to a nice barbecue?
I think that question is fit for someone with a larger political brain than I.
Yeah.
Is he to write the funny books?
Yeah, I mean, basically, this story I wrote is very, escapist, kind of trying to expand upon the stuff that I love, that I grew up reading or watching, and what I thought a good path for this character would be, and throwing in some things that you could, I guess, themes that people could relate to, and what they see as injustice and how to bring them to justice. I think the second book is really going to flesh the character out a little more.
Is it going to be him versus the Silhouette, or is it going to be him and Matt Black versus the Silhouette?
No. So this is a totally different kind of like line in time from the main story. So yeah, this is we're going to have the Silhouette in here in the next issue for sure.
All right.
And it sounds like you were also very strongly motivated to tell that story about social injustices, Mike. But you did it in your setting, where you drew very strongly from real world events, in the way you presented that conflict. Did you want less of a hero fantasy, I guess, in the way you executed it?
Well, I don't think I was thinking in terms of hero or fantasy. As I mentioned, my number one goal is to entertain. And I'm at a place in my life where I have to believe a story is real, right down to the nuts and bolts and the trash in the gutters for me to enjoy it. And this doesn't mean you can't tell any kind of story you want, because I thought Alien and Aliens are two of the most credible and exciting movies I've ever seen. And they're set place on a completely different world from ours. But within that world, they take themselves seriously, and they've thought it through down to the nuts and bolts in the wall. And that's what I try to do with my stories. I try to tell a story you believe could happen, regardless of the context or the setting. And necessarily, my story was very realistic. There are no superheroes. There's no superheroics. I thought I caught the personalities of the protagonists very well, and I played them out. I try to show them as three-dimensional people. The reaction was very positive, so much so that Thin Blue Line number 2 is already written.
Oh, wow.
And Joe's going to start illustrating that too, but it's going to be a completely different story, and yet it touches on some of the same themes. And the title of the story is The Revolving Door, which may give you an inkling of what it's about.
So playing off of that, I had a question I wanted to direct to Mike. So bear with me. This is a slightly longer question, but it deals with the concept of what we see in a lot of other comics, especially comics from people on the left. I'm interested in the fictionalizing of historical events that you do in Thin Blue Line. There's a guy by the name of Kunka who talks about autobiographical comics. He talks about memoir, and he notes how comics present documentary or real life events differently. And because of that, we know that we're being told, not a lie, but we know that because comics is not a film, because it's not, a documentary, that we're getting events mediated or translated in an artistic way. and that allows us to see different elements than we might see if we'd actually seen it on film. But Thin Blue Line is doing something different. It's choosing to represent real events through an additional layer of fiction. I'm curious, I just want to pick your brain on that. As opposed to writing a memoir or historical recounting of the 2020 riots, this story chose to frame it in fiction. Like we see things like Mouse or Joe Sacco's Palestine. Lots of people on the left talk about they retell events, and it's something that we've grown accustomed to. We see real stories all the time. The left is used to controlling the narrative, both in the news and then in the stories we tell after the news. And so I'm curious, why did you make this choice to take real events and fictionalize them? And is there a political side to that choice that was made?
Again, I have to emphasize that my number one goal is to entertain and tell a good story. But of necessity, these are recent events, and they are riven with politics. And of course, there's a point of view in there. It's partially my point of view, but there are other points of view in there too, such as the rednecks from the suburbs who roll into town with the Punisher logo on their truck and want to shoot rioters. And of course, the rioters themselves, they offer some justifications for what they're doing. But you can tell where my sentiments lie. I believe in the rule of law, and I'm rooting for the police. And I hope that the people who read the book are rooting for the police too and appreciate what went on. But again, I chose this material. I always say I don't choose my stories choose me. And as I was watching these events unfold, it just struck me that this is the stuff of a great story just waiting to be told, and I was happy to tell it.
So if I could bounce back on that and try, no, I won't ramble. So to tell an entertaining story, you could also just say, this is what happened, this is what went down, and and interpret that yourself, or you can say this is a fictionalized account, right?
I don't have to say that. It's not what you say, it's the way that you say it.
Okay. So I guess the question I've got is, why is it more entertaining, or why is it more entertaining to tell a fictional story than to recount a story like through a memoir or through documentary? Why do you think that is more entertaining? That's not a gotcha. I'm genuinely curious, because you have mentioned this multiple times. My job is to entertain, and so that tells me that you see that and prioritize that for a particular reason as a way to tell stories, as opposed to saying, this is just how it went down, I'm going to do it in comics form.
Well, also fictionalizing is a way of personalizing it, because I wasn't there. I wasn't in any of these cities that were torn apart by riots. It wasn't my business that was destroyed, but it's the writer's business to imagine the point of view of every character he's writing about. The better the writer you are, the more you can imagine. A good writer should be able to put himself into the head of any person he includes in his story, regardless of what they believe, their race, their ethnicity, their handicaps. You got to be able to imagine that point of view in order to tell a convincing story. There's a book by John Brain, who's a famous British novelist. He wrote Room at the Top, but he had a book called Writing Your Novel. And he said, nobody should try to write a novel before the age of 40 because they simply don't have enough life experience to understand what constitutes story. Well, I'm late to the table here, but I think that I have enough experience, at least with my imagination and with what I've lived, to imagine any point of view. So I'm not afraid of imagining any point of view. And that's why my protagonists are all over the place. Some are white, some are black, some are men, some are female. That doesn't frighten me. And I'll write whatever I please. And if it's good, readers will accept it. And if it's not, they'll throw it back at me.
That's going to make a hell of a clip.
No, I like how you said fictionalizing it personalizes it. That's very helpful. So thank you.
Nothing makes me tune out of
as a writer. Number one is entertain. Number two is show, don't tell. And that may seem obvious, but it's not. as you wade through one awful fiction after another. And the third is to be original. And how do we do that? Well, we all bring our personal experience to whatever it is that we write necessarily. Stuff that we know, stuff that we feel, that will work its way into our fiction, not for every character, but certainly for some characters, and usually for the protagonist. And those are the three rules of fiction that I live by. The ones that I forge for myself. There are a lot more. There are thousands of them, but those are my three.
You mentioned that you've also written vigilantes. You're, I mean, famously known for writing Punisher, probably the most famous street level vigilante. And you said as well you do like to incorporate as many different represented groups as possible. Here is Private American. It's funded at $72,000, and it is funded currently, so people can expect to receive that book. So you
and
are
if you're
very
interested in getting the book, please let me stick this in there, because otherwise it's hell to find, because we've been shadow banned.
Yeah.
But if you go to theprivateamerican.com, it'll take you right to the page.
okay. Let me grab that. The private.
You can do that for Thin Blue Line as well.
Well,
Very
it's,
cool.
I think it's thinbluelinecomic.com.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that is the best way actually. It brings you straight to the Indiegogo page
perfect.
when you do that. So I can just grab that here. Yeah, because I tried looking for it, and you are correct. I'm not able to search it on Indiegogo.
Theprivateamerican.com. Folks, you'll love it. It's going to be the most exciting book you read all year. There's all this controversy that's swirling around us, which I didn't ask for. They attacked me out of the blue. As I said, I don't choose my stories choose me. And I was thinking, well, what would the Punisher be doing today if I were writing him? And it seemed obvious he'd be on the southern border trying to intercept the human traffickers, the flow of fentanyl, and terrorists that are pouring across our southern border. 100,000 deaths by fentanyl every year. The value of the cartels has increased. In 2000, their annual income was $1 billion. Now their annual income is $10 billion as a direct result of our insane open border policy. It was crying out for a story, and nobody was doing it, so I did it.
Good luck against us. Stick it to the daily cause.
Phil,
You want to
sorry, go ahead, Mike.
show that?
Which one?
Let me give you the daily cause thing here.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to post it in the Twitter chat. See if you can put it up on the screen. People get a kick out of this.
Sure.
We were cruising along, minding our own business, and one day this appeared.
Okay.
There it is.
Let me make sure I can get that out of my DMs. I accidentally showed my DMs once before, and I don't want to repeat that mistake.
Uh-oh.
It was when I had a very special guest on. Many know him by the name of Mark Brooks. So.
Oh,
yeah. So here we go. Daily Cause. Punisher creator Mike Barron releases another racist AF comic book. Wah, wah.
AF.
Yeah.
America first.
Yeah.
These editors are getting better and better by the day.
Clearly some
sounds
highbrow criticism here.
This was written by a person who's never read anything that I've written.
Well, you're a master at your craft. You've been doing this a long time, and I'm sure you've inspired many. And the work you've done on Punisher is legendary. I'm wondering, Phil, did you take any inspiration from the Punisher when you were doing the American or the People? Sorry.
Oh, to a certain degree, yeah. I mean, that's what I said. I don't choose my stories choose me. And once again, I'm looking at the situation at the southern border, and I thought, man, this is just tailor-made for the Punisher. This is where he should be. And I thought, I'll do it.
Sure.
So if you miss the old Punisher, get this book.
Absolutely. Sorry, Phil. What were your take on the Punisher? Did you actually read that series before? Are you a big fan of the character? And have you read a lot of Mike's work? Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Punisher. I think the People for me, I mean, it's kind of like a mixture between Daredevil and the Punisher, and he's our street level vigilante. He's just a human. He's a guy trying to do the right thing. And you'll find out why and kind of his backstory in issue 2. But just at the surface here, and especially like the way the character moves, the way Dan draws him. I want to shout out Dan. Dan Dahl did the layouts, and Avery Butterworth did the finishes on issue 1. And for the second one, Dan's doing all the pencils, and Avery's going to be inking him. And then Dan's going to go and add some digital tones to it. But for just the imagery of our character, or really, especially giving him kind of like that grappling hook bat, very inspired by Punisher's kind of the way he would float around the city, swing from the city and acrobatics, stuff like that. Because in my universe, I didn't really have a character that fit that kind of archetype of hero that you could put in cool poses like that. So that was really exciting for us to break in with the people like that. The way he was conceived was my brother was scrolling through Google Images for something, and I saw the preamble, like the scroll of the preamble, and it said "We the People" at the top, and I looked really quickly past it, and I thought it was a baseball bat, and I'm like, oh, there's a baseball bat that has "We the People" on it, and I'm like, that would be cool, and then I realized it wasn't, so I'm like, that would just be really cool imagery. And the first image I had in my head of him was his back to the camera, the baseball bat across his shoulders, and then on his back he has tattooed the preamble fully down. And I'm like, that's badass, And so that's what we gave the character, and kind of that seed bloomed into what this story is.
Have you considered selling We the People bats? Because I think that'd make a hell of an add-on.
That would be cool. I don't know.
Is that legal? I don't know. Can you do that?
The shipping on that, I think, would be
Sure you can.
Yeah.
It's in the public domain. I was digging around for another vigilante book that a friend sent me, because there are a lot of them.
Sure.
I mean, I think all of them probably draw from your run on the Punisher. That it was so canonical that everybody's probably inspired by it in one way or another.
Well, me sure is too kind. The one I'm looking for was called Beware the Cat or something, and it's about an animal rights avenger, and it's unbelievably grim and brutal.
Yeah.
H.H. German created the book, and he's been sending me the series, and it's very well done, but you got to have a real hard stomach to read it, because it's very graphic. This guy loves animals, and his character hates people who abuse animals.
Yeah.
Do you read everything that's sent to you?
I think I've mentioned this
Oh no,
to
I
Phil
don't.
before.
People send me books all the time.
Yeah.
And you can tell at a glance if it's professional quality or not, because comics are a visual medium, and if somebody's going to go to the trouble of publishing a comic with amateurish art, I won't comment. I salute them for their initiative, and I urge them to keep at it. But I don't discuss bad books that people send me, because they don't need it, and I don't need it either. It's not my job to point out what's bad. It's my job to point out what's good.
Yeah. The art on Black Cat is definitely top quality. It wasn't my favorite story, but yeah, definitely top quality art.
I'll have to check that out.
I think I saw the campaign of that, and the digital copy was as much as the physical copy, and it's like I can't. I think $30 for a digital book or $20 for a digital book, if it's the one I'm thinking of.
How natural is that mentorship role for you, Mike? Do you feel like you grew into it very organically, or do you still feel
Well, no, a lot of people helped me on the way up, so I feel obligated to help others, but they have to be serious about it. And I do charge a consulting fee if we get real deep into the weeds. If anybody wants to send me their book, I'll discuss it with them. But if they say, well, how could I do this better, then it's $60 an hour. And I have to do that, because you have no idea how many people are constantly bugging me to help them do this or that or the other thing.
That seems fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might be hitting you up then.
Only 60 an hour.
Yeah,
I'm
wow.
gonna crowdfund it. I need 3 hours with Mike Barron.
To make the book that I will then crowdfund to get to.
Exactly.
Well, I try to
Yes.
make it worth your while.
Yeah.
I'll
I
bet.
think you opened the floodgates there now that you've let your feet out the door.
Yeah,
You're going to be
who
getting a lot of
knows?
requests. So,
Mm.
But I'm saying, creators out there, take a look at your work, and then take a look at the professional comics you like. You know what good art is. So don't waste your time.
hmm.
And then that might be indicative of the crowdfunding scene where people. I just reviewed a book the other day and only raised just over $1,000 USD, and the art was very amateurish. And I pointed that out in the review, and they're like, "Yeah, we've got to start somewhere." And I do get that, but it sounds cruel. But maybe not everybody can or should make comics. Maybe you don't have, if you don't have the money for it, if you can't, the art in the original Ninja Turtles is very amateurish in a lot of regards, but it's beloved and it's been successful. I wouldn't want to gatekeep anyone say no, you shouldn't make comics,
Right.
but if you can't
I'm
afford
gonna
it,
push
maybe
back on that a little bit.
hold
I
back
think
until
that-
you can afford it, until you can afford to do a really decent job.
I think anybody can do them. I think it's about what your expectations are. If you're doing really amateur art, do them, make comics, but because zines, right? Zines have lots of amateurish art, and people love zines. People understand you can't charge $50 for a zine. You know what I mean? So I think it has to do with what your audience is and what your expectations are. If you just want to pick up a pencil and paper and make comics, we shouldn't discourage anybody from doing that. But I think we should be very realistic with what the expectations are. And I think that in crowdfunding, some people have seen people make money, and then they've gotten unrealistic expectations, and that leads to some very awkward moments. So everybody make comics, but not everybody should expect to make what people who make comics on a professional level make.
Well, there are a lot of professional people in comics who are barely scraping by, frankly. Comics have fallen out of the popular imagination. And I think the main reason for this is that we have a whole generation of kids who don't read. They grew up on video games, and they're more excited by video games than they are by comics. And frankly, a $5 comic, the average $5 comic, can't begin to compare to the value for dollar that a good video game gives. Because for one thing, a lot of these video games are first-person shooter or whatever. You are part of the story, and that's more involving. And most of the comics that I see, there was a great science fiction writer named Theodore Sturgeon, and he created Sturgeon's Law. Sturgeon's Law says 90% of everything is crap. And it's true, and it applies to movies and books and comics, and it's only the 10% that rises above that. But when you see it, you know it. If you're reading a story and you can't put it down, or if you're reading a comic and you get irritated if somebody interrupts you, you got the real deal.
I remember reading somewhere that an average video game gives a child 11 pieces of feedback per second, 11 bits of stimulus. You got your power bar, you got your ammo count, you got the enemy's position on the map. There is nothing that can compete with 11 pings per second in your brain. We're fighting an uphill battle against them.
Phil, when did you know?
Phil is someone that
you
spans
wanted
the strata of comics, books, and video games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you know that you
What's
wanted
your
to make
opinion
comics
on this?
and create video games?
Hard. Well, I grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s. I'm going to turn 30 this year. So I've been around video games and comics and comic media. I got into probably what got me into comics was the X-Men animated series in the late 90s. Then the Bruce Timm Justice League stuff. I just ate all of that up and found comic shops, found a comic book convention. I think my first comics that I bought were old Cole Plastic Man issues from back in the day. Loved those wacky characters, some Alpha Flight stuff. And then I was in high school. I had a friend who was really into comics, and he gave me a list of Batman books, trades to buy, and just devoured those. I think Brian Azzarello's Joker was out at that time, and had a big influence on me, the gritty crime stuff. But yeah, the differences between the comic book and video games, you could see it just on how much money the different industries bring in between comic books and video games. Video games is artists leave comics to go
Yeah.
work in the video game industry because they're just gonna make so much more money, and probably it's less time intensive. You're just doing concepts instead of drawing 60 pages in a certain amount of time. So yeah, I mean they have us beat for sure.
This conversation is making me very sad. Can we?
I'm sorry.
So tell us about how video games are more profitable.
Exactly.
All wasting our lives.
Sorry, guys.
Yes.
Gosh.
Well, you're very serious about this, Phil, though. Like, you've put out a lot of work, and you do draw on the experience around you. Like you said, Mike, your book, and it's, I mean, how much of this is like a gourmet buffet that you're surrounded by so many legendary creators, and you get a chance to talk to them and pick their brains a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've said this before, but before I got into CG and met everybody in here, I was struggling to find an artist that was motivated to work on stuff, with writers, people that aren't experienced doing comics. Like, I have some buddies that were awesome concept artists for big video game companies, that were like, yeah, I'll help you out, and here's my rate or whatever, and they just like never produced anything. So now, and 4 years now, just getting into crowdfunding and meeting all these awesome people that now I'm buddies with, artists that are hungry, that want to create cool things that are going to last, is amazing. I've been so blessed with guys like Dan Dahl, who did the art on this, and after he read the first Lost Pages, he really liked it, and that I'm blessed that these guys want to work with me because they enjoy the characters and they like the writing. So I think if you're a writer and you do what Mike was saying, entertain, the original, and show, don't tell, I think those are amazing foundations to have your artists enjoy doing this work and try to make it not work for them, because that's going to produce the best work for you, the best stuff on the page.
Dahl's layouts were fantastic. That was really, like I said, that was amazing, and that's the type of thing that like you only get in a comic book. The type of thing where you can play with the panel structure and reinforce those themes. I want to see more of that. I was sold on seeing more of that, and so very excited to see more of those.
He's amazing. I talk to him every day. He's out of Minnesota, and he's a lifelong comic fan. He used to work at a comic book store, and he used to do con circuits and stuff, and just do like sketch covers, and he does amazing Copic marker work too. And he's been, he's hung out with Doug Mankey, who's one of our favorite artists, and he's another Minnesota guy. And Doug's tried to get his portfolio stuff pushed through DC. And I've talked to Doug about this, and he's like, yeah, I don't know. I've sent Dan's work to editors at DC, and just no one bites. He's like, I think he's one of the most professional guys that isn't in the professional industry right now. And I don't know what's going on with DC, why they're not biting on this guy. And
They forgot rule number 1.
what's that? Oh yeah,
Their job to entertain.
Their job to entertain. I do have a follow-up question regarding that. So how much of those is he doing, like all of that layout work, or are you in your scripting? Are you kind of like, hey, I got an idea for like what this might play with, and then he runs with it? Like, how much of that is you in concert? Or
so it's you can ask Chemo, because Chemo's read my scripts. I love layouts, and I love what we could do to the reader's eyes during layouts. So if I have ideas, I'll put that in the script. Like panel 1, I think this would be a cool idea. But if he has it, I think that big splash thing, I think it's like page 6, where they have the bang, 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 and those are panels itself. I think that's something Dan added, because we talked about this. We're like, I really want this to feel like a Frank Miller type thing. We're big Miller fans, and he was drawing a lot from his layouts and that, but he's just amazing on layout. So it's a little bit of him, a little bit of me as well, I think, throughout this.
Quickly, I just want to also plug in terms of the theme here, how important it is to entertain. Phil is entertaining continuously. He's got Lost Pages 3 now funding. Hopefully it's, I mean, are you Shadowbanned? Do you know Phil?
Yes, I am from the start.
Congratulations.
Wow.
You're in the
It's a
club.
rite of passage, Neil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, go give Phil a back. You know, his work is amazing. This is already the third book in this series, and we've reviewed the previous issues, and they've always gotten glowing praise from the entire
Thank
panel.
you.
Phil,
someone
you
who's-
got to send me that.
Oh, I definitely will. Yeah. On this campaign, if you guys haven't read any of this stuff, we're actually doing a collected version. See if I can find it somewhere. I have a proof copy of it, but it's right here. It's
Yeah, Chemo, you can send me Phil scripts too.
I don't think it works like that, brother.
So we're doing a collected version, so you guys don't have to miss out on anything. It's a new format. It's a smaller digest manga size, black and white, 212 pages, so you could catch up. There it is.
Very cool.
Kick-ass Alan Alonso cover, super thick, and it's all of the main storyline plus the supplemental stuff. And then also, if you guys like what you're hearing about the People issue 2 Ashcan is on this campaign as well, continuing the story. If you missed out on the first one, there's a reprint cover by E.J. Morges for the first Ashcan. So a lot of content on here, a lot of story. And Dan Dahl, he did this cover, amazing Dan Dahl cover with Shelby Robertson inks, and he's just killing it. He does the prologue to the main book and the full Ashcan story. Also, Simon Bisley. You guys ever heard of Simon Bisley?
yeah, maybe like somewhere.
This
you know?
guy?
This new up and comer, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a good guy. He did that awesome variant for us.
And as someone who's read them all, I can say each book gets better than the last. Like Lost Pages 1 was in my top 10 books of that year. Then Lost Pages 2 blew that out of the water. Lost Pages 3. They just got so much heart, so much character. Phil's definitely one of the top 5 dudes working in CG right now on the writing side of things. Just cannot talk up your stuff enough, my man.
Thanks, brother. It's fun. I'm just glad I have a place that people are and where they're at, and they want to see more stuff from us.
It needs more Scar.
There will be eventually. Yeah, the next book is going to have a lot in there.
Yeah, Lost Pages 4. The real star.
Is it inspiring, Mike, to see all of this migration of talent into the indie space now that the mains have forgotten how to entertain? Do you think this was always inevitable that it would happen this way?
Well, I don't. I think that the independent scene is going to thrive regardless of whether the big two are putting out quality books or not. If they put out better books, it would just excite more people to try and do their own books. But as it is, a number of us who have stepped away from the big two, we're putting out personal projects, and we think it's the best work of our career. And we just look at the product of Marvel and DC with incredulity. We don't understand why they think people want to read these stories. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about identity politics and lectures and stuff. I mean, you look back to the heyday of the great Marvel comics and the great DC comics, and you wonder what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't
personally, I didn't need Trans Superman.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
All of the gender and the the alphabet people exploration. Let's
right.
put it that way.
When I worked for Marvel or DC, my editors were people like Archie Goodwin and Denny O'Neil, who were writers themselves and understood story structure and what made a good story.
Right.
But I don't think that's the case. I can't say for sure because I don't know who these editors are, and I don't recognize.
They're really big on Twitter. Yeah, they're big on
Got a lot of
Twitter.
followers.
That's their credentials.
They really, the thing that apart from the politics that I've noticed that makes it really impossible for me to read them now is how much they want to take the heroes and just like tear them down and then lecture them after they've been torn down. It's like, let me emasculate Iron Man and then lecture him after he's been emasculated. I don't want to read that. Like what? I can get that from so many other sources. Why would I want to pick up a comic book about Iron Man to read about another guy getting emasculated and then lectured so that he has to be grateful for his own emasculation? No one wants that.
It was not entertaining.
Yeah, by hell it isn't. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're just going to continue to absorb the talent that they are missing out on here, and it sounds like the support systems are also developing here as well. Do you see how would you contrast those two environments, Mike? Since you were in the mainstream and you're in this space as well, a big fixture in both, a major figure.
With the rise of the independent comic and Comicsgate has revitalized my career. I've never been busier in my life. It's not just the work that I'm crowdfunding my own books, but work that I'm doing for others, for which I'm very grateful. And I'm still working on novels. I've been in a slump on this latest one, but I'm going to snap myself out of it or die trying. But as I said, I'm making a lot more money off these crowdfunded books than I do off of novels. I'm happy to write novels, and I'm glad they're well received. But the royalties probably don't amount to more than $1,000 a year.
What kind of support would a young creator like Phil had received in the mainstream prior to things going in the direction that they're in right now? Does he get more support, you think, here from creators such as yourself and others in CG?
Well, it depends on the quality of his work. Phil's work is pretty good, so I encourage him. But people are going to send you stuff that's not suitable for public consumption. They have no idea how to tell a story. You get a page with 250 words covering up all the art.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
And I try to inform them without harming their morale. But as again, I say, you want to do comics, you're a comic fan, you know what professional comics look like. So don't cough up something that is not of a professional level. Well, what if they're a great writer? Well, if they're a great writer, they can write short stories and sell those short stories. In fact, that's my advice to anybody who wants to write fiction is write short stories and sell them, because there's a big market for them, and that'll get you into print, and that builds confidence, and that builds momentum, and enables you to do more stuff.
So it sounds like the structure of meritocracy that's here appeals to you, and it's much stronger than what's in the mainstream.
I don't know about that. I know what I like.
Okay. Well, I mean, if anyone's got their thumb on what's good and what isn't, it's certainly you.
Well, thank you.
You definitely.
I'm certainly an enthusiast. I read all the time. I read books. I watch movies all the time. I watch TV shows. And I mostly read comics that my friends send me or that I exchange with my friends. Every now and then I'll buy a comic at a comic book store. Usually I'm disappointed.
Join the club.
It sounds like you're interested, though, and engaged in the creative space of CG. But what do you think of this whole architecture of crowdfunding in social media, and how voyeuristic and interpersonal some of these consumer-producer relationships develop? Kind of like this show, actually. There's a lot of overlap here where the fans are having this much time with the creators.
Oh, that's good. I mean, I love to discuss the process with like-minded folks. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun on Comicsgate Kings. But if you go to Barnes & Noble, they have an enormous graphic novel section, enormous. And only about half of it is established comic publishers like Marvel, DC, or Image, or any of that. The rest are put out by established publishing houses. You mentioned Art Spiegelman or
Joe Sacco?
Yeah, Joe Sacco. I've seen his books at Barnes & Noble. Bill Griffith, I've seen his books. Guys that used to be underground, guys that are new underground. Books that have an idiosyncratic appeal and have nothing to do with superheroes. A lot of them are autobiographical, and I love that stuff because I said, I love stuff that reeks of reality.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're reading a personal account, like Bill Griffith wrote a big graphic novel about his mother's affair with a famous artist. It was called Invisible Ink. And I thought that was terrific. And I knew that every word in it was true.
What about you, Phil? You came up in this environment. How challenging did you find it having to make your way through the social media environment to find success and be noticed for your work?
It's a hustle. It's a grind. I mean, I don't know how much money and super chats I've sent out to promote my books over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
I
How
don't
many
want to
bots?
know. I don't want to know. But also streaming, and it is a constant thing. I've dealt with, had arguments about it with my girlfriend in the past, and how much time I'm spending on streams to get my stuff out here, and it is a grind, but it's also fun. But you talking about like your original question with the did you use the word voyeurism? Is that what you said?
It is voyeuristic, yes, because we get to know the creators
Sure.
in a parasocial kind of
Sure. I
level.
think there is good and bad to that. Creators becoming too familiar with their readers could have some cause and effect in the long run. And it's been 4 years, and I'm sure there's some of that going around. But I love talking writing. I love talking comics. I love talking why we're here. And I think it is, people have made the comparison. It's a convention every day where your readers get to ask you questions and reach out to you and stuff like that. I think there's nothing else like it. I think we need to remember why we're doing this stuff too, from time to time.
It sounds like treacherous waters, though, where you have to navigate a lot of potential sharks. So
Sure, you could look at it that way.
yeah. Any prickly personalities that you've come across, Mike, in your time here? Has it been?
Oh, honey, don't let me commence.
Yeah, I mean, on the internet, in an open space like this, it attracts all types, right? And
Yeah.
the personalities are going to cross the entire spectrum, whole gamut of personas. Yeah, I don't know if we want to go into lore, but do any of you remember the war campaign days and what
Hell
those
yeah.
experiences were like?
Yeah.
No.
There was a
Yeah.
point where people were afraid to speak out against them or against anybody whose back they had. They start posting in a thread, and you'd hear people in the back room saying, "Don't engage, don't post.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what you post, doesn't matter what you do." And I'm not for or against. I sort of come in on the back end of that, but I just saw people talking, saying, "No, that guy's war campaign. Don't engage." People were scared of them, and that's a pretty crazy thing when we're just making comic books.
Yeah. Well, and then people now don't remember, but like in 3.5 years ago, everyone was. It was, and it evolved into what it evolved into, and now things are, life goes on. But
Mm.
yeah, I remember I was been around a while, I guess, in CG.
So this kind of thing should be
So
more
Phil
constrained.
coming out his war campaign.
It sounds like
Guys,
this kind of thing should be more
I gotta
constrained.
go.
Yeah.
All right, Mike.
Thanks
Thank you,
for
Mike.
having me on.
Good talking
Thank you
to
for
brother.
being
Mike.
here.
All
Great
right.
talking with
Man.
you.
See ya.
All right.
Peace.
Yeah, we'll probably wrap up in just a few more minutes. I usually
No.
go about 2 hours. No, you want to keep going? I'll get the box wine and do an unzipped, and we'll really have fun.
Phil, how far ahead have you got stuff planned without giving us too much details? Like, you already say, "Oh, book 4, we might have this character in it." Have you got book 5, 6? Like, have you got it worked out that far ahead, or is it just sort of like the next 6 months? Like, it takes months to make a comic
Yeah.
book. Did you know you were going to be doing Crim in book 3 when you were doing book 1, or is that just who you felt like at the time? And you said, "Look, we're doing book 3. What am I feeling? I'm feeling Crim. Let's go with that."
Wait, he's doing Cream in book 3?
God damn it, Admiral.
It's just my accent.
So I think probably when I wrapped, or while I was writing book 2, I kind of knew like the layout of where I wanted things to go. Kind of focusing in on each character. So this is 3. 4 is going to be focused on Wild Card. 5 is going to be focused on the Masquerade, and those two, where they fell in order, and kind of this order kind of culminated on the 6th book, where that's going to be like the event book where people meet each other. There's a build up to that. So yeah, I know that is the plan and kind of map for right now. Is something like for the people, it's right now it's either going to be 3 or 4 issues, and I know the ending. And I think the fun part too with the people is, since it is a 20-page story, I could kind of write it as I'm writing it. Like with issue 2, I learned a lot about the character while I was writing the character and while I was scripting things out. And the dynamics between writing something that is a single issue like the people compared to something that is like our main books is very different and fun in different ways. For this
I've got to
first
agree with
issue,
Mike about doing short stories. Like
Exactly.
most of my writing credits are short stories and backups in other people's comics, and
Right.
it's its own skill set. And there's a real purity to being able to fit a story into 8 to 12 pages. It's like you've got this page economy, and you've got to sort of make things worthwhile. You got to get people invested in that short period of time. I've got a whole video on my channel about like why you should be writing short stories. It's just benefits your skills, your ability, your tool set in every way.
Right. Yeah.
I would second that and say also webcomics, just like strip that you do with like a buddy. You learn a lot of craft just by doing a strip over and over and over again. Even if it's the same amount of panels, you'll just pick up a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be controversial and say none of that matters.
Oh,
it all matters.
Yeah.
No, something I learned from writing that first people issue, because it was only 20 pages, and I'm used to writing, like our Magicop books are 93 pages. It's 4 issues together. So what I learned is or in a theory of mine, is how to make a short story like that, a single issue, feel not like it's 20 pages. So I did a few different setting changes. There's different backdrops to this book. It's not just one setting. You got the courtroom. You got an alleyway fight. You have his apartment. You got the bad guy's apartment. And so there's maybe like 5 or 6 different settings in these 20 pages. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like it made the story seem fuller and longer, even though it was 20 pages.
I initially said it had the vibe, the attitude of a backup story in Marvel Comics Presents. I don't know if that was around when you guys were getting into the scene, but they'd get these sort of B story characters, and they'd put 3 or 4. They do like a Wolverine lead story, and then have like 3 stories afterwards. So it had that attitude, but it had the pacing, the structure, and the size of. Because 20 pages, that's nearly a floppy. 22 pages is just in a floppy these days. So you're basically writing a floppy, and those scene changes would help establish the beats and would help establish that sort of. It's like an accordion. You're sort of coming out with the accordion and stretching out this story, but there's a real skill to be able to fit all those beats into a limited page count, whether it's 8 or whether it's 20.
Sure, Chemo. Compare comics to Polka. We need to be less relevant to our audience. It's like an accordion.
It's a visual medium. It's a visual medium.
Beautiful accordion.
It's good enough for Weird Al.
Phil, how much should the accordion influence you?
There you
Right,
go. Speaking of accordions, there's a story I'm working on now that may involve an accordion.
Oh yeah.
So
Okay.
keep in mind.
Lost pages 5, The Masquerade.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to throw out there, earlier we were talking about kind of the influence or the start of this story and where it came from. A big reason this first issue unfolded the way it did, and it was kind of revolved around searching for a serial killer, was that serial killer scene in the middle of the book, which is the people reading this note that the supposed serial killer wrote. I wrote that when I was in college for a college class. Like that is directly taken from a previous thing I wrote that was, the teacher gave us a prompt, and I wrote that. And
Damn, what did that professor tell you when you turned that in?
well, my peers were like, "Is this what a serial killer thinks like?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the best compliment I could get for that." So
Yeah.
Preston said, "You clearly need to go make comics. Don't you be trying none of that serious literary writing. You're a genre fiction writer. Go
You didn't
write
get to
some
sit down with your
comics,
professor saying, "I
Yeah,
need to
don't
talk
worry.
about-"
It's just the giant guy in class that's just writing murder fantasy.
the quiet kid."
That's funny you say that, Twitless, because on a different piece of writing that I actually based the first Silhouette story off of was a short story I wrote about the Silhouette back in college. And she gave me a grade on it. I don't remember what it was, but she gave me notes to revise it. And she's like, this city doesn't seem real. It seems too drab and not realistic. Like it's too like a hellhole. I'm like, have you been to the south side of Chicago at 4 in the morning? That's
Have you read
literally
Frank
what
Miller?
Yeah.
Sin City is the worst. No, the city itself is the worst.
Yeah, have you ever had someone try and pull open the emergency exit on the Green Line?
Yeah. While it's
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah, come on.
Train. So yeah, I took some of the old writings I did that I was pretty proud of and wrote them into these comics. So that one, that was a full kind of like short thing I did back in the day, and that influenced the plot of this storyline.
Well, the two bits of writing advice I see the most is people say, you want to write well, read more. If you want to write well, read well. Write well, write more. Read more, write more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a vote in that favor. You're taking stuff that you wrote years and years ago and you're bringing it back full circle to influence. And if you don't, like Mike Barron was just saying, he reads books, he reads comic books, he watches movies, like as do we all. If you're not exposing yourself to that stuff, I think you're limiting the amount of stimulus you've got. The fact that you can take stuff that you've used years ago and use it to influence. You don't know what you write now, how that might influence something in 20 years' time, or it might not at all. It might fall by the wayside and you forget about it. I can't count the amount of times I go to my work in progress folder and see a document. I'm like, that's a strange title. What's that all about? And double click. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I was writing that story. Like I got so many things on the go.
Yeah.
People who, that's the thing about like, if you don't read well, if we don't read, we can tell that you don't read when we see you writing. And I think the same goes for writing as well. Like maybe those early days, get yourself a little group of people you can trust and get feedback on it and develop that skill. Maybe not everybody should be putting their first bit of writing out there. They should refine it and develop it over time.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I still ingest as much comic reading as I can, and started reading some novels too, like fantasy stuff. So,
Did you receive any training, or did you just kind of dive in and develop it all on your own?
I took obviously a lot of writing stuff in college, but yeah, nothing. Yeah, I would research stuff on YouTube and listen to comic creators and writers and tips and exercises from them. So kind of when I was really early on into forming some of my early comic scripts, it's funny enough, Kelly Sue DeConnick had some advice that I think she got from her husband. Yeah, I think
She made a sandwich for him first, and then
Some normal shit.
I saw a video. I'm pretty sure she's like, "Oh yeah, Matt, this was his tip." So she said that if you're a new writer, a good exercise to do is read some of your favorite comics and reverse engineer them, describing the panels as concisely as you can, so that you would come up with that panel. So I did that for some Alan Moore Swamp Thing stuff for a while. Also, like there's a lot of collections or trade paperbacks that sometimes include the scripts in the back as kind of back matter.
Mm-hmm.
So those were helpful and stuff like that.
That's some good tips because I think a lot of people come into it thinking, well, I've read stories, I know what's good in a comic, I can write a comic, and they don't necessarily can. They don't necessarily have that ability. So saying something it's a grind to go back and say, look, I did my time. I I was looking at panels and breaking them down, reverse engineering them. Like I did that grind for months and months and months until I got to the point where I felt confident. It's like doing, if you can't do push-ups, so they say that you do, or chin-ups, you do like reverse chin-ups where you lower yourself down. You can't pull yourself back up because you're not strong enough. So you jump up and you lower yourself down again until you build up enough strength to pull yourself up.
Regardless of how you do it, writing is like, okay, so it's interesting because people will go, well, how do you become better at a sport? And it's like, do you teach someone here's how to throw the ball once? I got it. I can now do it perfectly. And it's all about practice. And I think people have an expectation towards writing that's very different. When in fact, writing is like any other skill in life. If you want to do it, you're going to have to just practice it and understand that there's going to be a learning curve. And some of that curve is going to be correlate to your talent. Some people are more talented at things, but anybody can get, writing isn't magical. Like any other skill, you can get better at it. Just practice it a bunch.
I think you also just have to take other people's writing and then reverse engineer it.
I think a self-aware writer is going to be saying, when I was this age, I was writing a lot like this guy. I read a lot of this guy's books, so my writing resembled that. I can point to periods in my life where my writing was influenced by certain people whose work I'd read a lot of.
Steve Irwin.
I'm sure that guy was illiterate. He spoke the language of the forest. He spoke the language of the animals.
That's kind of why I was asking about Mike Barron's Punisher run, and like if you had a chance to read any of it, Phil, because I feel like there's a lot of inspiration to draw from there. And then you also you stream with the creator, so you have a lot of access to pick his brain a little bit when you can. On what kind of thoughts, what his thought process was during that run and all that stuff. So
that's why I sent him a copy of the book too, because I wanted to get feedback from him and where I should go from there, and if I was on track on stuff too, because I know he's so prolific and has delved into this genre a ton. But I think a lot of the inspiration for the writing style of the people probably came from a lot of Frank Miller stuff. And if you read this people story and you read any of the other main Lost Pages books, I'm pretty sure, and I kind of made a conscious effort of this, it's the only time that I use thought bubbles in throughout the universe. And I did that on purpose because kind of harken back to kind of old school Daredevil stuff, old school comics, and what he's thinking in the moment. Even though a lot of people get that through to the reader through caption boxes, and I do that all the time as well. But this is, different. You don't see it a lot anymore, and I think it kind of helps push the theme and relate to the art a little more as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We've hit the 2-hour mark. I don't want to drag it out too long, unless if you want to hang out for an after stream, I'd be down for that. But usually, people want something digestible in 2 hours seems to be a sweet spot. So, everybody, check out Phil's Lost Pages 3. Check out Mike Barron's Private American, and thank you, panel. Twitless, Admiral Wackass, Kimosabi. Thank you very much, Phil, and Mike in absentia, Mr. Barron. And thanks for the great book, guys. We enjoyed reading and talking about them tonight. It was amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to show this off. This is actually the first page of the People Ashcan 2. Here, pencils.
Those some tight pencils. Pencils.
Toy.
So Dan's switching to, he's doing all the pencils now, and then Avery, who was doing the finishes before, is going to be inking them. And then Dan's going to go back in and do some tonnage to give it that retro feel. But yeah, opening page here of our protagonists sketching away. There'll be some sketches on here too. And then for some reason, this super sexy stenographer, she's like a bomb.
Just caked up.
She is good. Yeah, she's caked up. But he's got to go back to work, and then you see what he was drawing. He's kind of now obsessing about the silhouette. So fun opening page. Just wanted to give that a shout out, and you guys could get that on the Lost Pages 3 campaign as an add-on or in any of the tiers.
Cool. I'll drop the link one more time. Since you are shadow banned, we should try to get it out there as much as possible. Make sure people have plenty of opportunities to back. And catch us again real soon. Hopefully we have another review coming up for you shortly. Until then, everyone, have a good night.
Peace.
See ya.